Hey guys, it's Adrienne. So a while back, I had showed this beaded crochet rope that I've been working on now for probably about a month, and I showed it in one of my whip videos. And there were a lot of questions on how I do this. So I thought I would do a little tutorial. So for this one, I am using 11-aught seed beads, I believe they are, and a 0.75 millimeter hook. And then I'm also using size 40 mercerized cotton. Now this I picked up at the thrift store. And then the beads I already had. So for the purposes of the tutorial, I'm going to be using larger beads and a larger hook. Let me just set this aside. So you're probably going to need a tray to put these on, to put whatever beads you choose to use on there. And then you're going to need a large eye beading needle, depending on what size of beads that you're using. This one, yeah. And then for the tutorial, I'm going to be using Just Cotton by Premier. So to start out with, what you're going to do is you're going to thread your yarn or your beading thread or whichever you're planning on using, and you're going to put on all of the beads that you intend on using. You're just going to thread them all on directly to the yarn. Like it's, I've got several feet pulled out of this yarn, and you're just going to work directly from the skein, and you're going to thread all the beads that you want to use directly on there. Just like this. I'm not going to thread all of these on. And as you can see, I already had some on there. And then you're going to take your beading needle off. And I'm going to set this tray aside just to get it out of the way because my table space is slowly shrinking. So for the tutorial, I'm going to be using, you can't see it anymore, but that's a 3.5 millimeter hook. So you start off with just a regular slip knot, just like that. And you're gonna bring, I always do 6, but you could do 4 or 5, and you're gonna bring those down to the end where your hook is. And I'm going to push mine up just a little bit. And so you're going to bring one individual bead down to the base. I hope I'm still on. There it is. Yep, I'm still in frame. Sorry guys. You're going to bring one bead down to the base where your hook is, and you're going to chain over the top of that. And you're going to do that 6 times. And I will say that these first couple of rows are the hardest to manage. Once you get going, it's no big deal at all. It takes no time. It works up pretty quickly. It's just about getting started. Go back up there. I always choose a pretty small hook. I find it easier to work into work with the beads when the hook is much smaller. I'm hoping you guys can see what I'm doing. Maybe I should bring this down a little bit. So I've chained 6 beads, and that's what it looks like. And so you're just gonna go underneath. Hold on. Turn it around the right way. You're gonna turn it like that, and you're gonna go underneath this bead with your hook. Now this thread needs to go over the top of that bead, so you're gonna push this bead down, and your working thread needs to be over the top of that bead. Let me get some more beads here. So my next bead is orange, and we're going to bring that down just like that. And you're going to pull it through. You're going to pull it through this loop right here. And then you're going to pull it through the loop on your hook. And that is the first bead for round 2. And basically you're just working in a spiral. So for the next stitch, for the next bead, you're going to go underneath that bead, so the bead's actually sitting on top of your hook. You're going to push it aside and bring up that yarn so that the yarn is sitting on top of this bead here. Bring your next bead down to the base, yarn over, and slip stitch. Depending on how tightly you stitch, it can be difficult to get underneath the beads. But like I said, I typically prefer to have a tighter stitch. Gotta get some yarn. So underneath that bead, try not to stab yourself in the finger because I've totally done that a few times. Make sure to bring this working yarn over the top of that bead. What it does is it pushes these beads down. And these can always get in the way. So it's going to look like a total mess for the first couple of rounds. But probably about the 5th round or so, it'll really start to look pretty, and you won't be able to see the stitch work, this stuff inside. You won't be able to see that. Make sure to put that over the top. So and you can see when you're working with 6 beads, if these would go away, when you're working with 6 beads, it's easy to tell where the next bead is that you need to go, because you can always count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so that's going to be the next one that I go under. So going underneath that one, putting your working yarn over the top, and then I can slip stitch to add that purple. I'm hoping I'm staying in frame. I know I have a huge problem with staying in frame, guys. I do it all the time. I slip out of frame. So underneath the next bead, put the working yarn over the top. And then, oh no, don't do that. Slip stitch. Now this stuff does take a little bit of time getting used to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, right there, that could be confusing. So you would count back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's this one here that you're going to go through. And you're going to slip underneath it, over the top, add your bead, and slip stitch again. So I know it looks like a huge bundle of just knotted beads, but I'm going to work up a couple more rows so that I can show you guys what it looks like. And you're just going to do that slip stitch. That's all you're going to do until you get the length of rope that you are trying to acquire. So I will meet back up with you guys here in a moment when I've got a few more rows worked and it doesn't look as much like just a ball of plastic beads. Alright guys, I'm back. And as you can see, as you continue to do rows, the beads will start to lay flat. Now you're working in a spiral, so this bottom portion is going to look a little funny. But that's your first bead, and you're just working around and around and around in a spiral. If I'm staying in frame. So, you know, this is just a little sample. And also a thing that you can notice, or that you will notice, is this is the slip stitch variation. Now, if you choose to do a single crochet, your beads will be further spaced apart. With a slip stitch version of crochet rope, your beads are going to sit directly on top of each other. You aren't going to see any of the stitch work that's in the center. You're not going to see any of that. But if you do a single crochet, it will space the beads out a little further and you'll be able to see your thread. So to finish off one of these crochet ropes, you just stick your hook underneath the bead like you would if you were going to add another bead. Instead of adding another bead, you're just going to slip stitch just like that. And what that does is it pushes this top round of beads, it pushes that down flat so that it'll stack up like that. So you're going to go underneath your bead. Always make sure that your working yarn or your working thread is over the top of your bead, just like that. And then slip stitch through both of the loops on the hook. Like I said, I tend to do this very tightly. That's just how I prefer to do it. It looks cleaner to me that way. So I'm going to go all the way around, just slip stitching to stack that last round of beads on top of each other. I'm really hoping my camera's staying in focus for all of this. So I'm at my last bead right now, and you can see like all the others are stacked up nice and smooth, and this last one, it's because it needs a slip stitch over the top, and then it'll flatten out like the rest are. So that's how you end your how you get the last round of beads to flatten out. Now, if this weren't a sample piece and I was actually trying to make a crochet rope necklace or bracelet, what I would do is I would fasten off the yarn, and then I would take a, let me see if I've got one handy. I don't have one handy at the moment, but I would take a an eye pin, and I would, once I had fastened this yarn off, you know, it's all tied off and everything, I would take an eye pin and I would hook it underneath as much of this as you can, and then you would thread on a bead cap, which if you don't know what a bead cap is, I do have one of those handy. You'd thread on a bead cap, which this one is too small to, you know, use on this, but for example, this bead cap, you'd thread that on, and then you could attach your closure or your clasp, whatever kind of a clasp that you wanted. You would use the rest of the eye pin to attach your closure, and you would do that at both ends. You would take an eye pin and hook it through around as much of the stitch work that is visible. You know, something to this effect. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect because it's all going to be covered up with a bead cap anyways. And then you would attach your closure with the rest of the eye pin, which I don't have one handy, but you know, you can find eye pins on Amazon or any website for beadwork. So I hope that helps with the with this crochet bead rope. I know a lot of people were interested in it. The only thing I have to say really as a tip, like, it's always better to thread on more beads than what you're going to use, because if you run out of beads, there's not really really a good way to add more beads to the project. So you always want to thread on, you know, more is better in this kind of a project. So, and of course I always use much tinier beads, but you can use different combinations of beads, different sizes of beads. It's just, you just have to play around with it and see what works for you. But that is the method that I use to make crochet bead rope. And you know, you can make these things. They don't have to be necklaces or bracelets. I mean, you can use them for purse handles or, you know, something like that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you guys in my next video.